and believed in the positive impact government can have on the lives of people. Government service has allowed me to work to promote peace, protect human life, enhance education, safeguard our environment, and improve the health care of Oregonians. And that indeed has been a thrilling journey. We gather today at the Oregon Historical Society, an institution that he loved so much, to kick off a year-long commemoration of the life and legacy of Mark Hatfield and the historic and positive difference he made for this state and this country in his thrilling journey. And today, of course, would have been his 99th birthday. In his 46-year public service career, Mark Hatfield's name was on the ballot in Oregon 22 times, 11 times in a primary election, 11 times in a general election. His record, 22-0. Why was Mark Hatfield the most popular, enduring, and influential Oregon political figure of the last half of the 20th century? It's because what he did after he was elected. Whether it was leading the effort as a 31-year-old state representative to finally pass open accommodation legislation here in Oregon, because back before then it was legal and done in Oregon and Portland to discriminate at hotels or for any other reason, or whether it was creating Oregon's community college system as government, or risking his career resolutely opposing the war in Vietnam when that was a stance very much in the minority, or using his leadership, of course, as a leader on the Appropriations Committee to bring federal dollars in record numbers to improve infrastructure in every corner of Oregon. Mark Hatfield was a public servant of intelligence, integrity, and effectiveness. Here at OHS, we plan on commemorating Mark Hatfield's life and career in a number of ways over the coming 12 months in the lead up to his centennial birthday. First, through the traveling exhibit, which we will officially open in a few minutes. This exhibit will remain here for several weeks and then will travel to museums and libraries around the state. We've already gotten many requests for it, including a request in Washington, D.C. by the National Institute of Health. It'll return here next July 12th for the Centennial celebration. We're also planning a variety of other programs, and of course, we'll be honoring the Senator through our Hatfield Lecture Series, which brings leading historians, biographers, and journalists to Oregon, and which was the idea of Senator Hatfield when he returned here to Oregon after his retirement from the Senate. By the way, you're going to be the first to know, we haven't gone public with it yet, but we have booked the kickoff speaker for the Fall Hatfield Series. It's Yamiche Alcindor, White House correspondent and host of Washington Week. Buy your tickets soon. A few people to thank for this exhibit here. I want to thank Tara Cole here at OHS. Tara, raise your hand. She was the curator of the exhibit, and whenever we have a tough design issue, we call on Brian Potter Design here at Brian. We've got a number of special guests here today. We'll be hearing from some, but I want to call out a few others. We have Governor Barbara Roberts right here. Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici, my congresswoman. Governor Kulongoski over here. And we'll be hearing from his wife in a little bit, but first gentleman Dan Little right here. So. I also want to welcome State Treasurer Tobias Reed. Tobias, and a very special guest, Senator Hatfield loved very much, as I did, Congresswoman Elizabeth First. And I talked to her many times this year about this celebration, and she was going to be here. Unfortunately, Elizabeth passed away, as you know, a few months back, and we're honored that John Platt is here today. John, Elizabeth's long time. And we have many members of what we refer to sometimes as the Hatfield Mafia. If you're a former staffer or intern of Senator Hatfield, raise your hand. Look at this. And afterwards, the Hatfield Mafia is going to be gathering on the veranda over here for root beer floats, which was the Senator's favorite. So we'll be having root beer floats with Mrs. Hatfield a little bit later. So The godfather of the mafia, however, is not with us, and that, of course, is Jerry Frank. I spoke to Jerry just about an hour ago. He's in Salem. He asked me to give you all his best wishes and wanted me to tell all the Hatfield staff to clean up your desks. His special passion was clean desks. So. Well, we're going to hear from a few special guests now who share some memories of Senator Hatfield. And his career was so long, it spanned generations, of course. Generations of Oregonians grew up with Mark Hatfield in office as governor or senator or legislature. And one of his close friends when he was governor was a state representative from Redmond named Sam Johnson. Sam and his wife Becky were influential figures in Oregon for many, many years. I believe, Betsy, that it was Governor Hatfield that made your mother the first woman ever to serve on the State Board of Higher Education. They were very close friends, and Senator Hatfield was delighted with Sam and Becky's daughter Betsy was elected in her own right to the state legislature and state senate. And how fitting it is that it is the Sam Johnson Foundation that is the sponsor of this exhibit here. And because of their generosity, we will be sending it at no cost to museums around the state. There will be no cost, so round of applause for the Sam Johnson Foundation. And join me in welcoming State Senator Betsy Johnson.
Come and break things, right? First thing. Thank you so much, all of the dignitaries here. This is certainly a governor-rich environment. And the indomitable Mrs. H. You are about the best, Antoinette. We all love you. President Bill Clinton once said of Mark Hatfield, because he tries to love his enemies, he has no enemies. Today we stick a love wins sign in our front yard and think we've done our part. But do you love your enemy? Mark Hatfield tried hard to live his Christian faith. He knew that there were people who sneered at the idea of loving thy enemy, especially if thy enemy had an R or a D after their name. Throughout his life, he reached back to the advice his father, a railroad blacksmith, gave him when confronting tough moral choices and peer pressure. Stand alone or come home. In 1953, Oregon's Civil Rights Bill, which required the states, as Kerry just said, hotels and other accommodations, to accommodate everyone, regardless of race, religion, national origin, that bill came before the legislature. There, a young state representative, Hatfield, successfully fought efforts to attach an amendment that would have put the issue before the voters. He wisely said it would stir up divisiveness among the races. Mark Hatfield could stand alone and remain gracious while doing so. He took strong stands but didn't pick fights. He counseled his staff to never speak ill of another senator. Criticize instead the issue or the public policy at hand, not the person. In his first year in Washington, D.C., Senator Hatfield realized how easy it would be to lose touch with the people and their thinking if he confined himself to his office or the conceited atmosphere of the nation's capital. Mark and Antoinette Hatfield never forgot where they came from. I remember watching Mrs. Hatfield campaigning in a Central Oregon house under construction where she was determined to shake everyone's hand, including some roofers working about 20 feet up. You remember that, I know. She shitted up the ladder and shook every one of their hands. She listened to what they had to say. I know this story because it was our house. It has become a common refrain that a moderate Republican like Mark Hatfield couldn't get elected in these partisan times. It's easier to go along, whether it's your fellow colleagues, your political party, the latest media obsession, or the rabble in the streets, than it is to stand alone, like Senator Hatfield often did. Partisanship doesn't require much effort. Just follow along. He liked to say that the political solutions are found in the center, not on the left wing or the right wing. At the time he retired, he told journalists he would miss the people, but not the process. He didn't like the campaigning had become a year-round event. The senator would probably be dismayed to see how recalls now have become a part of the process. What would he think of the hatred that flowed so freely in Portland streets, even right outside this very building? Hatfield had political passions from an early age. He channeled that energy into real results, not pulling down statutes, stopping traffic, or throwing things at the cops. At age 23, Mark Hatfield had already been face-to-face with real war and real combat. When he was sent to Hiroshima after the bomb had dropped, he told the journalist Tom Brokaw how his crew encountered some children who were very hungry. The crew took their lunches, divided them up, and gave them to the kids. Senator Hatfield described how sharing sandwiches with people who had been his enemy felt like a form of therapy. After learning to hate with the passion of wartime, he said he could almost feel the hatred leaving him. Think about what you were doing at age 23. I hope that as this exhibit makes its way around the state, visitors will be inspired. For all the hard work and vision that Mark Hatfield contributed in his many public roles, we cannot take for granted that this state, this nation, will last forever. The work never ends. Thank you.
I see no special guest I want to call out. She was very good friends with Senator Hatfield and Antoinette. They just lit up whenever she was around. Former State Senator Margaret Carter, right over here. Senator Johnson spoke about the bipartisanship in Democrats and Republicans, and there was a time when Republicans actually occasionally endorsed Democrat candidates, and Democrats endorsed Republican candidates. And one of those times was Senator Hatfield's last election for U.S. Senate was 1990, the toughest election he faced. And there were some courageous Democrats who crossed party lines to endorse him. They included Elizabeth First, of course, who endorsed him. They included Bob Duncan, who he beat for the U.S. Senate, and then endorsed him in the campaign. And the late Congressman Duncan's daughter-in-law, Kim's here today. She knows the story. And it also included a young Portland City Councilor named Earl Blumenauer, soon to become Congressman Blumenauer. And he's with us today. Join me in welcoming Congressman Earl Blumenauer.
Thank you, Terry. We really appreciate OH facilitating this celebration of Senator Hatfield. It's going to take an entire year for us to be able to fully appreciate and spread the word about what this gentleman did. Yes, I was proud to have organized and chaired Democrats for Hatfield. It did raise a few eyebrows from some of my Democratic friends. But in retrospect, I don't think anybody who was involved with that had any second thoughts. Mark Hatfield's re-election was the right thing for Oregon. More important than party, more important than the short term. And it was interesting watching people come together. It was a reflection of his half-century of work, the outpouring of support, and it ended up not being quite as close as we thought. Deservedly so. My first political memories of the senator as a college student at Lewis and Clark, when he was the only governor who stood up and was against the war in Vietnam. I mean, that was sort of earth-shaking. And when you think about the Bob Duncan dynamic that came up later, it worked out because the force of his personality, his integrity, smoothed it out and brought people together. What a message for our time after January 6th. I had an opportunity to visit with a number of the Mafia, the Alumni Association, who I still count as friends and advisors. Senator Hatfield, I think, would have been, if he were with us still, might have been a voice that would help calm some of the passions and be able to convince them that we ought to respect the democracy, respect one another, be able to get past it. Now, I think that his voice could have made a difference. I think the celebration of his life can make a difference now in Oregon. I had all sorts of things I won't bore you with. Some of them have already come up. Some of mine I just might have choke up. I'm wearing a bow tie. Senator Hatfield did, in fact, endorse me when I ran, but he gave me some sage advice. He said, "You often wear a bow tie, don't you?" I said, "Yeah." He looked at me and said, "Always wear a bow tie." You know, I thought about that for a moment. They had just celebrated the retirement of Paul Simon, who always wore a bow tie. And I've never not worn a bow tie in your nation's capital. And it helps me out. I don't have to wear a member pin, you know. The guy with the bike pin, the bow tie, let him in. Let him in. But it was he had a very practical aspect to his political vision as well, is he was so successful. But there's just one example that I think we today can reflect on. In the 90s, there was the balanced budget amendment. That was going to be the solution for all our problems. Now, Senator Hatfield, chairing the Appropriations Committee, had his own solution for controlling government spending. That is, control government spending. Stop coming to me with requests and doing this and doing that. Cut spending, raise taxes. Pretty simple. But the balanced budget amendment was a solution that somebody else would solve it 7 years from now. And it would be baked in the Constitution, regardless of the circumstances. That legislation roared through the House of Representatives and was poised to pass the U.S. Senate. It failed by one vote. The only Republican who voted against it was Mark Hatfield. He understood that there will be times we have to spend money to preserve our democracy and our economy. Think what we would have gone through this last year if that balanced budget amendment had passed. We wouldn't have the Recovery Act. We wouldn't be able to make Betsy's job a little easier in the state government. The economy would have been in shambles. And but for Mark Hatfield, it would have been enacted. He had the vision. He had the courage. He had the fortitude. And for me, that in and of itself is a powerful example of what our job should be. Now, I have been told by people on his staff that he was distraught because of what he had to do to his fellow Republicans. He went to Bob Dole and said, "If you want, I will resign. There will only be 99 senators, and you'll get your amendment." Bob Dole, to his credit, refused to accept that resignation. And we're the better for it today. Thank you.
Congressman Story was pointing at me because I was working for Bob Dole at the time. And Senator Dole, knowing of my friendship with Senator Hatfield, came to me and said, "Is there anything you think we can do to get the Senator to change his mind?" And knowing the Senator, and they tried everything. As Mrs. Hatfield knows, they tried his son-in-law, Manis, who worked for in the Senate, to try to get him to change his mind. He wanted to call Billy Graham, who was a friend of the Senator's, to get him to change his mind. And knowing the Senator, I said, "No, there's nothing. He's made up his mind. His conscience is clear. And unless you can get Herbert Hoover to call him." Got to know when he was at Stanford, and that was going to be impossible. But, so by my research, I think Senator Hatfield, you've heard of the EGOT, you won the Emmy, the Grammy, the Oscar, the Tony before. By my count, Senator Hatfield is the only person in Oregon history who served as state representative, then state senator, then secretary of state, then governor, then U.S. senator. Now there are some who come close.
Governor Kulongoski over here was state rep, state senator, attorney general, Supreme Court justice, and governor. Not bad, but not all the nothing. But there was one person who has a chance. She was a state representative, she was a state senator, she was secretary of state, and now she's governor. So here to announce her candidacy for the U.S. Senate, Betsy Brown.
Thank you, Carrie, and it's not happening. So everybody take a breath of relief. I do want to start out by saying thank you to the Oregon Historical Society for bringing us all together today in person in honor of such a remarkable human being. Thank you, Carrie, for your leadership, and thank you to all the staff for doing such a remarkable job. Let's give them a round. Mrs. Hatfield, Antoinette, it is so great to see you, and I know you must be so incredibly excited and proud to see your husband's life of public service put on display for all of Oregon to see. I want to say thank you from both myself and the first gentleman, Dan Little, for your kindness, for your generosity, for teaching us a few things, and for making sure that the governor's residence, Mahonia, is filled with remarkable memorabilia from the time that Governor Hatfield served as governor. Thank you. I think if anyone were to ask who is one of the most consequential Oregonians in our history, I think most of us would agree that it's Senator Mark O. Hatfield. He was such an important figure. When I say he left his mark, I mean that literally. There are three qualities I think of when I think of Senator Hatfield. The first is courage. His willingness to put principle over politics. My colleagues have shared really amazing stories. The second is his gentleness. And I had the experience of seeing that firsthand when I was a young Secretary of State. When I brought him a framed cover of the Blue Book that had been produced when he was Secretary of State. He was incredibly gracious and generous with his storytelling with me at that time. But the third, of course, is tenacity. When I went to the dictionary to look up tenacity, it said doggedness, persistence, willingness to take on all odds. For over a decade in Oregon history, civil rights-minded Oregonians tried to pass legislation to prevent discrimination in public accommodations based on race. While he was a student at Willamette, Mark Hatfield had the opportunity to be a student representative on the concert board of Columbia Broadcasting Company concert series. Generally speaking, artists performed and spent the night in small communities like Salem. However, there were 2 hotels in Salem, both owned by the same man, and they refused to serve people of color. 2 extraordinary human beings came to Salem to perform. One was Paul Robeson, and the other was Marian Anderson. With both of these extraordinary guests, the senator had to drive them back to Portland, where their presence was graciously accepted at Portland hotels. He was elected to the legislature for a second term in 1952. And in that second session, he chaired the State and Federal Affairs Committee. He had to work the membership hard, but the bill that was sent to him was the bill that would prohibit discrimination based on race in public accommodations in Oregon. He worked very, very hard, And in fact, he had to convince one of the members' wives to get her husband to vote for the bill. It passed the House, it passed the Senate, and it was signed into law by Governor Patterson. Senator Hatfield was an ally for good. He saw something wrong and he worked hard, very, very hard to correct it. His tenacity and his spirit moved members in the right direction and secured a monumental win for civil rights in Oregon. You'd be hard-pressed to find an Oregonian with that strong of a legacy. And it wasn't just because of his titles. Of course, there are many. It's because of his lifelong dedication to justice and to equity and to public service. This traveling exhibit captures Senator Hatfield's service to his state, his country, and his community. It honors his legacy in so many areas of public policy, highlighting the way he advanced Oregon to be the state we know and we love so dearly. I share the honor, as Kerry mentioned, of having served in 4 of the same positions as Senator Hatfield, as state representative, as state senator, as Secretary of State, and as governor. Don't worry, I am not running for the U.S. Senate. I promise, Dan. I absolutely promise. I have been inspired by the example he set and his legacy. This traveling exhibit captures Senator Hatfield's service to his state, to his country, and to the world. A legacy that has shaped and advanced Oregon in so many ways. I hope that each and every one of us, every single Oregonian, gets to enjoy this exhibit. Thank you to the Oregon Historical Society and so many others for marking what would be Senator Hatfield's 99th birthday with this extraordinary visit. Thank you all.
Senator Hatfield was, of course, as it happened, he was a diplomat. And every diplomat needs someone who occasionally, isn't diplomatic and tells it like it is. Senator Hatfield had Antoinette Hatfield, who told it like it was. He described her as the greatest person he ever knew, his Rock of Gibraltar. All of the Hatfield staff, many who called her Mother Hatfield, have stories about the advice she gave. I'll never forget, after I'd been dating Becky, who would later become my wife for some time, I brought her over to meet Mrs. Hatfield the first time, and afterwards she called me up and said, "You'd be an idiot not to marry her." And when she came to her wedding, she said, "No, you're not an idiot." So she also is an incredibly talented fundraiser. And she is the best development director that the Oregon Historical Society could ever ask for. So feel free to talk to her afterwards if you're thinking about giving to OHS. She'll convince you to do it. And it's a love of history because she was also in high school the winner in Grant High School, 8th grade, the winner of the Burt Baker Brown or Brown Barker History Student Award. Yes. Contest. It was a contest, and she was the winner. She won $5. She said for the best historical essay. $25. That was big money. And she's going to join it here. She's going to officially cut the ribbon on the exhibit. So join me in welcoming the one and only Antoinette Hatfield.
It was nice of all of you to come out and celebrate this, and it was certainly nice, Kerry, to get it all organized, and all of you, old, new, and, well, young, some too young here, I see, not too many. Gray hair. Anyway, thank you all for coming to kick this off. I know it took a lot of trouble. You know, it does take trouble.
Super. Well, I think we've got some scissors over here, Sarah. I'm gonna bring the scissors up. Right here. Yes.
Yay!
The other's now open, so. So I do want to mention a few things here before we close, and would invite you to come out to walk around exhibit and invite the Hatfield Mafia to do so, then out to the deck for the root beer floats. Many of you might have seen, was done a couple years ago, this wonderful video played on OPB called Gentlemen of the Senate, telling the story about Senator Hatfield. We have copies available in the gift shop there, and then just out today, for the first time, Richard, where are you? Raise your hand. Right here, Richard Etchelin, who is a great author, has written 60 books, just out published by the University of Oklahoma Press, is the political biography, Marco Hatfield, Oregon Statesman. It's a beautiful book, so dedicated, and he dedicates it to the Hatfield family. He's got a signed copy, I know, for Mrs. Hatfield. But this is the first time it's available for sale here in the gift shop, so be sure and get a copy. It's a really well done book. We begin with the words of Senator Hatfield, and I'll end with them. In his book, the book he wrote at the end of his career, he wrote this: "I might do things differently in my life if I had it all to do over. I suspect we all would. But I never regret a moment of my time. I treasure a satisfying sense of accomplishment, peace of mind, and a belief I did everything with the quality I respect most, integrity. And what do I wish, finally? I wish a life full of blessings on every citizen, every mother, daughter, wife, father, son, husband. That is my greatest wish for all of us who make up this precious land." Thank you very much for attending today. Come on and see the exhibit. Happy birthday, Mark Hatfield.